what led up to me being homeless.
Yeah.
Well, when my daughter was diagnosed, she was here at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego, and she had a very her treatment was intense. She had chemo and radiation, so most of the time we had to be inpatient. But when we were not, because I was the only person caring for her, I was there with her all the time. So I lost the place that I was staying in because I was no longer working. Everything happened so quick, and like I stopped working. She was diagnosed. I lost my place, and so at this point, she just began treatment, like her chemo and radiation. So we were the first month we were in the hospital for like 21 days. So in the back of my mind, I know that once we leave, it was like where are we gonna go? But I tried to not focus on that because she was sick. So when the 21 days hit and it was time for us to when we can leave the hospital, I contact a few of my cousins, and the cousin that said that she could come over, he had 4 kids himself, and he was living in like a 2-bedroom apartment. He knew my situation, and so I took her there. I stayed with her because there was a lot of medication she had to take and shots. Once she went to sleep, I left and I was in my car, like sleeping like not too far from there, so that I can go back in the morning before she would wake up to give her medicine, just to be there so no one else would have to worry about doing anything for her. And that was really hard because I was in my car at night in a pretty bad area where, there's always police, people knocking on your window. I couldn't sleep and I was scared.
Yeah, I hear that, what I'm hearing from you right now is, your focus was completely on your daughter and
Mhm,
taking care of her.
mhm.
And, that focus was necessary, and, it led to you losing your job and some of your income, which jeopardized your housing. And then
Correct.
again, when you're the one who's choosing to sleep in the car, you're placing your daughter and her safety and her well-being at the forefront as well.
Mhm.
How long was that period of time where you had to make that sacrifice of making sure that she had a roof over her head and you did not?
Yeah, it was 3 to 6 months around that because it was more than 3 months. So, but it was less than six before I was contacted. And first, I received a public housing voucher. That's when I went to San Ysidro and lived in public housing. So I was traveling from San Ysidro to Rady Children's Hospital back and forth. And then maybe not even 6 months of living there with the housing, the public housing, I received an actual Section 8 voucher. So I was able to move and find my own place, which led to be pretty hard. I didn't think it would be that hard, because it was so easy me to go to this public housing. But when I got the voucher, I started applying to places closer to the hospital or even like not so far from the hospital, maybe like a few miles from there. And I absolutely had no luck. They wanted me to make 3 times the rent. Um, my income, and it was just like things that I have a Section 8 voucher. So obviously I can't make 3 times the rent. And it was very hard for me to find a place.
And I mean, how do you think this affected you? Both when you're down in San Isidro and you have public housing, but you're having to travel what I imagine is, where I'm estimating, is at least 30, 45 minutes to Sharp. I mean,
Hmm.
how is that affecting you? And then how is the difficulty of, once you have that voucher that will allow you to be closer to the hospital and to care for your daughter, and doors are closing there? Can you tell me about both those things?
It affected me. I was like to the point where I didn't really even want to apply. I almost had to get an extension on the voucher so that I can keep it, even though I had never used it, and I kind of shut down to even like look. And I was fortunate enough to have a friend whose mom had some property and she told her, and she had no problem with joining. But while I was going through something as stressful as my only child being sick, dealing with cancer, on top of that, me having to worry about where we're going to lay our head when we're not here, that's the most stressful time I've ever had in my life. And it was hard for me to like put trust. I was like, I've always been a working mom. I've always worked to support us. And in the time that I couldn't work at that time was out of my control that I couldn't work. And I just felt like alone, lost. There was nothing. I'm trying, but I just can't. Even though I got this voucher, I'm getting blessed with it. But now I have to deal with trying to find a place because nobody would rent to me. That was
What
very
were
stressful.
what were some of the things that you heard when you took this voucher to potential housing providers?
Two, I know two in particular, they just downright didn't take Section 8 housing voucher, period. But it didn't mention it in the ad. It didn't say that, we don't take except, it wasn't saying that. But once I applied and they ran my credit and all that, and they seen that it was on there, we don't accept it. Then there was a couple that you have to make 3 times the amount of the rent. And I was like, okay, well, that it didn't say that in the ad too. So I'm just assuming that I can go use this voucher and any landlord would be happy to take it because, that's guaranteed they're going to be getting paid. And that wasn't the case. They 3 times the rent. Sometimes they wanted double deposits. It was like those were the main things: the double deposit, 3 times the rent, or they did not take Section 8 housing vouchers.
Can you tell me a little bit about, your conversations with these housing providers? Did you at any time try and explain how Section 8 worked, or or did you have any in-depth conversations, or were you just so focused on, securing that housing that was so important?
There was one that I did have because I at this the second person that said they didn't accept housing vouchers. And so when I spoke to this individual on the phone, I said, well, in your ad, you didn't put that you don't, in fact, in this ad, it said we accept most income. It never said like we don't accept Section 8 housing voucher. And so when I spoke to them, I was like, I didn't see that in your ad. And I really wouldn't have applied to have you turn me down with, that brings your credit score down. But I asked him, I said, do you know what, Section 8 is? And he was like, I've heard a few things about it and I just don't want to deal with really the rules and having to do all of these things, which made me feel like they're basic living, like this is basic living. They just want to make sure this is a decent place and that the owner is, we're paying you, so make sure that this place is up to par. And to me, it just sound like they didn't want to deal with that. So in my mind, I was like, well, he must be like a slumlord or something, because these are these basic rules that he didn't want to comply. Like, that's the reason why. And he was kind of more like, no, I just don't want to deal with the Section 8 low income. Like that's what he said. And I was just like, at that point, I just said, okay. And I left it at it. But to me, it was just uh, shocking because this person didn't know my situation. I've never been in trouble. I've never had an eviction. I've never like caused any problems in where I live. It's just me and my daughter. So you just making this assumption about because I have Section 8 that it just seemed like I'm poor and I'm at the time I was, but I'm not like ignorant, to this. This is something that's just guaranteed money to you. But I didn't, after that, I just said okay, because I wasn't gonna argue, because I would have got really angry because I was already dealing with so much. I just wanted to try to get an understanding of why, now that I have Section 8, you don't take vouchers. But it bothered me because his ad said we accept most incomes. It didn't say we don't accept vouchers. And they just, I gave up at that point. I didn't want to argue with them. I just wanted to get a better understanding myself of what's your reason for denying me. You know, I didn't know how many people applied, but I know he responded to me. My credit was, pretty good, but I guess he didn't see all that part at the bottom, or he overlooked it until when it came time for him to talk to me about, go over the application while talking to me over the phone. And he seen it at the bottom. He was like, oh, Section 8, you have Section 8? Yeah, yes, I do. Well, then he asked me questions like, are you going to be able to pay 2 deposits? I said, no, and you didn't say that it's required for me to pay 2 deposits in the ad. He said, well, in this case, because you have a voucher, most of the time we want to secure, that's something he said to me, we want 2 deposits just to make sure nothing's damaged and, or that it can cover the, I was like, okay. I said, no, I can't pay that. And then he started asking me about the 3 times the income. And I just wanted him to be aware, you didn't mention any of this in your ad. I wouldn't even applied. If I would have seen all of these, we don't, I wouldn't even apply.
Were you surprised to, as you're going through this, to find that it was so difficult for people to accept the Section 8 voucher?
Yeah, I had even reached out to Section 8 and was like, is there somewhere that I can move where they most definitely take vouchers, and that's, and they were trying to kind of helpful and telling me about the Go Section 8, and most of those places on there take it, and I started looking, I was like, oh, okay, I see most of these people do, but it's like it's their own community of landlords or people that are owners that they have that they know will rent to you. I didn't think that it would ever be a problem to where I have to go to a specific place or a website just to find someone that's willing to take this voucher. But I had no problem with it either, but I was just surprised.
Yeah. Do you happen to remember, where a lot of these places were located?
Kearney Mesa, right, like Kearney Mesa in that area, and what's right after that, Claremont. Um, and I think the furthest location was like a little bit before La Jolla. So they were all towards children or in that vicinity where it wasn't too hard to get to Children's Hospital from there.
And so when I heard you say that, at that point you sort of gave up, tell me a little bit about how you kind of looked inside your own network and found someone who was willing to rent to you.
Well, a close friend of mine, I, reached out to her and it was like telling her about the situation. And she was just like, well, let's just talk to my mom because she just brought another property, and I've been knowing this person since we were little, like 10 years old. And of course, when I told her, she didn't really know too much about Section 8, but she was happy to join just so that she can rent to me. And I still rent from her now. I never went outside of her because I just was like, it makes no sense for me, even while working. And I really didn't have a need to move. But when I shut down, I was like, let me see what I can do as far as my inner, like you said, inner circle. And I was fortunate enough to where I could. But if she wouldn't have rented me, I don't even think I would have been able to keep the voucher because I would have been able to get an extension or two. But if I wouldn't have been able to find a place by then, you can't have the voucher. You only have so long. I think they give you 90 days, and then you can get an extension for another 90. So, in that time, I'm dealing with chemotherapy, inpatient. So when I'm inpatient for sometimes 21 days, I'm not even thinking about what's going on outside or when we're leaving until like maybe a day or two before it's time to leave. So it was just like my mind was programmed that, you know, I just need to find a place, but it really didn't dawn on me till it was closer time for us to leave the hospital because I would be in the Ronald McDonald House. But it was just like a blow to know that it was so hard and so many people just had this, I want to say like they feel negative about Section 8, or even though they're getting paid regularly, continuously every month on the same day, you guarantee this money. So I didn't know if they thought it was like going to be some people coming, like I don't want to say ghetto, but just like poverty coming to a better area and just didn't want to try to integrate. And that's what it felt like to me, like, but they knew nothing about me, what type of person I was. They just knew I had Section 8. So
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
It did. And I think I want to go back to one of your points, just because we are taking the time to kind of educate ourselves. And I think something that you mentioned, maybe not a lot of people know, is that if you have a Section 8 voucher, and I do want to highlight this point, if you don't use it, if no one accepts it, you lose it.
Hmm.
And you lose that opportunity to get rental subsidies. That you mentioned that there's a couple extensions, but at some point, if you're not housed, that assistance goes to someone else, right?
Exactly. Yes.
What would you tell housing providers who are still hesitate, or who have some reluctance to rent to someone who has Section 8, or other types of rental assistance?
Well, that just depends on um, the owner, what type of person they are. They open to try new things, and maybe they should, maybe listen or learn a bit more about the rules and the Section 8 program, because not everybody that has it is going to bring, I mean, I'm not saying that anybody will bring problems, but there's a lot of rules that the participants have to abide by too. So there's, if they want to keep their voucher, they have to be neat, clean, quiet, follow the rules. You can't have people at your home that's not on your voucher, like living there. And, they're very strict with type of people, or the people that have vouchers. Um, the rules, they have to abide by a lot of rules, more than just a typical renter that's just going to rent. And there's a lot of rules to abide by, and they should really learn more about the program to see, they're going to be paid, they have direct deposit. This is a steady stream of income from them, as long as they abide by certain rules too. It's just not, it's a lot of people that are biased toward it, and they don't really, I think they don't know, because they just go off what they think they know. Just Section 8 in general, they associate that with poor and people that they don't want to bring to their community, because they're different ethnic, or they have different backgrounds, and they're different. They want it to be as, they shouldn't be like that, because in the long run, they're going to have tenants to move in there that might cause them so much damage, that way more than the cost. Where if you have a person that has to abide by these rules, they're going to comply, because they want to keep their voucher. So I just feel like they should learn more about the program, and just open their minds a little bit more, and not be so just wanting a certain type of person to live there. They don't know too much about you, and it seems sometimes it seems like they don't really want to know. They just know that it's Section 8, and that's just not fair.
Yeah. And again, I want to highlight one very important point that you just made, that regarding the rules. And I just see a comment that addresses this as well, is that there are so many rules. And if you don't comply with those rules as a Section 8 voucher holder, and the high standards that you're held up to, you lose
Mhm.
it.
You do.
Um, and so, yeah, I think that that's important. I want to thank you a lot for talking to us about your experience and just how difficult it was. But I want to change the conversation now a little bit, about what you're doing today, and specifically, your work that you're doing with Heal. Can you
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about Heal, what it is, and how you heard about it and your involvement?
Sure. Well, Hill is a very, I love this group. I found them Googling, because I wanted to give back once I was in a position to where I had time and I could try to make a difference. I Googled them, and I seen what they were trying to do, and I, responded and filled out the online application, I believe it was, or email. But they responded immediately and invited me. And I went to, I think it's the San Diego Housing Federation over on Ohio Street, and they were so welcoming that they provided lunch for us. But once I joined here, I learned a lot of the laws, rules, and um, just like general ways that you can talk to people, or things you can do to put out the like get your voice heard. I learned we met with a lot of legislators, mayors, different people came and heard our individual stories. And I did learn that, every person in the group, we all came from different backgrounds. We all were homeless at one time. Some of us were able to come out, and Heal Group just teaches me, how I can help to advocate for this, for homelessness in San Diego, in a way to get my voice heard to who needs to hear it. You know, I've learned so much with them, and it's just been a blessing to be able to, meet with other people. And it was really, you know, to listen to everybody's story and what happened to them, how they became homeless. You just never know what type of person, or their background. It's a lot of people that judge, but the Heal Group is very exceptional. Everybody in this group has real life experience and can share their story, and we can talk about things in a way to where we're just, communicating with each other, trying to learn, um, better ways to get our word out or help with the issue that we have of homeless here in San Diego. Um,
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely doing that. And I'm taking a look at some of these comments that we're getting in, and they just really show how much of an impact, and how appreciative we are of you, sharing your story and being part of this group, like Heal. One of the some of the comments that I'd like to share with you is, and there's a lot of them as I'm scrolling through. you know um a lot of them, they're saying that they don't realize how common this issue is, and that people are sort of forced to make very difficult choices between staying where they are, or losing the voucher. And I think you touched on that. You haven't moved from where you are, partly maybe because you're comfortable, but it could also be because of what you've experienced, I think.
Probably a little bit of both, but I am comfortable. It's just me and my son, and um, it's very quiet where I am. I'm still in City Heights, but um, I live in some townhomes. They're individually owned, and it's just, I didn't want to ever have to deal with what I dealt with to try to get the place. And just, for me, I just set goals to where once I leave here, I plan to purchase my own home, so I don't have to, maybe I can get back to, once I'm in a position to do that. But I really didn't want to have to deal with explaining all of this and being turned down by people, and it's just not fun to deal with that at all.
Yeah. Another comment that I think is important is, what I've never understood as a provider is the reasoning properties or landlords have to not want to rent to voucher holders. My question is, what reasonings have you heard from properties? The assumption is that, and I think you touched on this, that simply it must be bias and discrimination, because economically it just doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't, because it's like, like I said, there's rules and stuff that we have to follow, and it's just like when they see that word Section 8 or voucher, they have their own thoughts of what these type of people are like, and they just don't know. And
Um,
I've never had a experience like that until I got the voucher and actually seeing, like, wow, these places that I'm going to apply to is just me and, a kid. What do you think? What do you think we're going to do here to bring your property value down? That's what I used to think in my mind. But that's just me.
yeah. I have another comment here. It's so often overlooked how a person's mental health can be so greatly impacted by these stressful situations, which in turn can make it harder to get back on one's feet. And if you add in discrimination, it seems like everything is sort of working against you.
Mhm.
And I think that the comment ends with thanking you for sharing your story, um, and acknowledging that this is probably happening way too often.
Mhm.
Another comment, says that this is so inspiring and there needs to be improvements in our policy and regulations. And I think that's what you're trying to address in your work with Heal, right?
Mhm. Yes, it is.
Let's see. Another comment I think is good is that your experience shows that there are many landlords who are frankly not in the business of providing safe and accessible housing for folks, or at least not taking a tenant-centered approach in their housing, and that's very troubling.
It is. I do know a couple of people that do have vouchers now, and they run into issues. Like one lives in Santee, and in the summer, her air conditioner went out. She has 5 kids. She didn't want to like tell the landlord because her landlord is like so strict, and she just is so like she makes her feel some kind of way. But she ended up she told her, and it took her, well, just luckily it was time for her to have an inspection. So these were things that you have to have. If it's in your house, they have to fix it or remove it. So they had to fix it, but she said that that wasn't the first time that that happened, and it wasn't in the summertime, but it took her landlord almost 3 or 4 months to even
Wow.
send someone to, and then she raised the rent. So, I was like, wow, I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I keep scrolling through comments, Alan Edwards has shared some very valuable information from the Department of Fair Employment and Housing on, some of the protections that come, once you have Section 8, and I encourage everyone to take a look at those. A comment from Rosemary is specifically to you, which is, thank you for sharing your story. Your strength and your perseverance is commendable.
Thank you.
Um, and one of the last comments here is from Bernie, and he says that what you speak of is basically systemic racism, and how its effects and its continuance in the housing market. Um, so on that note, I really do want to thank you again. I think I thanked you at least 6 7 times, and I can keep doing it because I think um one of the takeaways that I've had from these last 2 days is, you know looking in our own communities and looking at our own actions to see what we can do, in order to confront some of these problems. And I think talking about them and is a first good step. So
Mhm.
thank you again.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And but before I turn this over to Stephen Russell for some closing remarks, I did want to kind of end this with emphasizing that we're, we all know that there's a lot of laws that have been passed, at the federal, at the state, and at the local level that protect us from discrimination. But like I just said, that solution to housing discrimination, or any other type of discrimination for that matter, isn't going to come through the work of attorneys or fair housing agencies. It has to come from us as a collective us. And I think we've all taken those steps to begin to understand some of our country's history, and we've decided, and we've had to make a choice and decide that we're not going to tolerate that kind of discrimination in our backyard and in our country. And I can't think of another better way to close out this panel than by returning to what Dr. Enmark said and shared with us yesterday. He took the time to visually share just how things remain so unequal here in San Diego, and he referenced that he made this conscious choice where he said, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to participate in that. And I hope that we can all feel empowered enough to kind of make that same statement going forward. And, like Dr. Green said, that we all work towards progressing in our own journey from that awake, woke work. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. I was supposed to pass it over. I'm sorry. Back to Stephen.
I think he's about to join us.
Okay, sorry about that.
We are here. Thank you, Shalise. It's good to see you. It's been a while, and I really appreciate your leadership and participation in HEAL, and you've helped make it the extraordinary program that it is. And we're looking to grow that, and that we look forward to your leadership and mentorship with other participants in the future. So,
thank you.
Some powerful statements. Yes, thank you. And I guess I would also want to say, as we reach the end here, I want to thank Rosalina for this panel today, obviously, but the work that you do every day, because as the stories we heard earlier, I mean, things that we take for granted, laws have been passed, our work is done. We often, is commonly felt, and clearly the work is not done. And to hear the voices of folks who have been so badly impacted, so in devastating ways. I mean, to hear the gentleman talk about how, he'd hoped maybe we could expand our horizons. I mean, isn't that really what this is all about, is that we should be able to expand each other's horizons, and the deep sense of dashed expectations that came when that housing did not come through. I think Shalise is far too gracious when she suggested that she used the phrase ghetto. She said, well, I wouldn't want to say that they said that or felt that. We, I think, heard that that's what the person was feeling and thinking about. I mean, that was the pejorative word that was in someone's mind. And Shalise was far too gracious to ascribe it to somebody. And I think that comes through more than anything else, is your graciousness through incredible trial. And this is why we work together, just to see that someone doesn't have to struggle with so many things at once, that it should not be such a burden. I guess I also want to thank, if I may, at this point, Amanda Nelson, who is our Director of Communications, for helping put together those videos so we could have testimonials of folks who were unable or for reasons of caution unwilling to be interviewed on video, but were able to submit their testimony to all of you nonetheless. And so thank you, Amanda, for your work there. I want to turn it back to Estela de los Rios for a few words before we close out. Estela is, again, president of the San Diego Regional Alliance for Fair Housing, one of the driving forces behind this conference today and the work of SDRAFFH. Estela, are you there? I think she'll sign in momentarily here. While I'm waiting for Estela, I would like to thank again our sponsors, and I really like to make sure that they get highlighted because they are amazing. SDRAFFH, of course, San Diego Regional Alliance for Fair Housing. And Brooklyn, can you help Estela?
There you go. Thank you. I couldn't get on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. I will step back.
It was a pleasure being with all of you today. Thank you again for joining us for our 5th annual Fair Housing. And we can all agree, I know I learned a lot today, and I was very inspired with all the remarks and the courageous speakers, especially Shalise, for sharing her stories. We can all relate to everything that's been shared, and hopefully you all will take away a lot of information. I know that I did. And as we remember Fair Housing Month, I just want to remind everyone, the 1968 Act expanded on all acts to prohibit discrimination concerning the sale, rental, financing of house based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and handicap and family status. So please remember, it's Fair Housing Month, and we want to remember that to firmly further fair housing. And again, thank you for participating. Don't forget to fill out our surveys, because it's important that we hear all the feedback so we can have another successful conference next year. And hopefully we will return to normal. We will be able to see each other and share with each other the same space. Thank you again. And I think we're closing out now. So unless there's any more questions, Steve, I will close it out now. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Please do your surveys. Thank you for sharing these 2 days with us.